Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal Jason had been moving through his days like a man untethered from time, driven by a singular, all-consuming purpose that left no space for rest or distraction. For weeks, he had hunted for the truth about Britt with an almost feral determination, chasing down every lead no matter how fragile or remote. He combed through security footage that offered nothing but grainy silhouettes, interrogated sources who spoke in riddles, and traced phone calls that ended abruptly the moment he identified himself. His life had contracted into a relentless cycle of pursuit, each day bleeding into the next in a blur of unanswered questions. Sleep had become a rare and fractured indulgence, meals an afterthought, as though his body had been repurposed solely as a vessel to carry him toward this one truth. Every fragment of information he uncovered seemed to dissolve into dust as soon as he tried to hold on to it, and each step forward brought with it an unnerving sense that someone, somewhere, was carefully engineering his frustration. The deeper Jason pushed into this search, the more he sensed that what he was chasing was not just a missing person, but the shadow of a larger operation. Britt's disappearance had left behind traces, but these traces were deliberately faint, as though someone had brushed away her footprints just enough to make following them maddeningly difficult. He began to suspect that every lead he pursued was being allowed to exist, that he was being funneled through a maze designed not to reveal the truth, but to exhaust him before he could reach it. And yet, the possibility that Britt was still alive kept him from stopping. It was a fragile hope, but hope nonetheless, and it was enough to keep him moving forward even when the trail turned cold. While Jason was locked in this relentless hunt, Joselyn was waging a parallel war of her own. The transformation from civilian to WSB agent had been rapid and unforgiving, and now she was deeply embedded in an active operation centered on Dalton. Every scrap of intelligence she intercepted, every coded message she decrypted, every surveillance run she conducted felt like a step towards something pivotal. Though the Dalton case had been presented to her as self-contained, Joselyn couldn't shake the sense that its edges bled into something far bigger. There was a lingering instinct that somewhere, buried in the evidence, lay a key that could also unlock the mystery of Britt. That thought drove her as much as her official orders did. But no matter how much effort she poured into the case, the fog refused to lift. The operation felt like a stage play where the most important actors remained hidden in the wings, pulling the strings but never stepping into the light. Every time she thought she had grasped a breakthrough, it slipped away, replaced by another layer of secrecy. And yet, beneath all the shadows and misdirection, there was a constant, low-level hum in the background. A presence she couldn't name but felt at every turn. The truth, when it finally began to take shape, was nothing like what Jason or Joselyn had imagined. It did not lie in the coded transmissions Joselyn had risked her life to intercept, nor in the dead-end trails Jason had pursued across multiple countries. It sat instead in the mind and hands of a man neither of them had thought to suspect, Vaughn. Vaughn had known for a long time that Britt was alive. The knowledge was not a recent discovery, nor the result of a lucky break. It was a fact he had carried for years, a secret that had taken root in his life like an unmovable stone. And it wasn't simply awareness, it was connection. The bond between Vaughn and Britt was intricate and guarded, woven from moments that were short but intensely charged, encounters that seemed accidental to an outsider but were in fact calculated and deliberate. In these stolen fragments of time, words were few but the weight of what was unspoken was heavy. They spoke in glances, in the subtle shifts of body language, in the quiet assurance of two people who knew more than they could ever admit. This connection existed beyond the scope of what Jason or Joselyn could comprehend. It wasn't romance in the conventional sense, nor was it a mere alliance of convenience. It was something in between and beyond, shaped by history neither of them had been privy to. And Vaughn understood that to speak of it, to even acknowledge it, would set off a chain reaction that could not be stopped. The forces invested in keeping Britt's survival a secret were powerful, faceless, and merciless. They operated in shadows deep enough to swallow anyone who stood against them. Vaughn had seen firsthand what happened to those who got too close, and he would not allow Britt, or himself, to become another casualty. He had built walls around the truth, not just metaphorically but practically, burying details in layers of misdirection, setting false trails, and feeding half-truths to anyone who might suspect. Every time he crossed paths with Britt, it was in locations so carefully chosen they seemed to exist outside normal geography, hidden villas in unmarked territories, dimly lit safehouses where the only light came from a single overhead bulb. Their meetings were brief, their exchanges concise, but each one reaffirmed the unspoken pact between them: the world could not know she was alive. For Jason, the idea that someone could hold the truth so close while he was tearing himself apart to find it would have been unthinkable. For Joselyn, it would have been a betrayal of the highest order. But Vaughn lived in a different moral landscape, one where survival was currency and trust was a liability. In his world, loyalty to Britt meant silence, even if that silence condemned others to despair. The moment unfolded with the deceptive calm of a scene that should have meant nothing, yet carried the weight of a revelation that could upend everything. Joselyn had been moving through the sun-drenched grounds of the Five Poppies resort under the guise of a casual afternoon stroll, her training reminding her to blend seamlessly with the tourists and wealthy clientele who lounged by the poolside or lingered at the open-air bars. The air shimmered in the heat, the scent of frangipani drifting lazily from manicured garden beds, while the steady pulse of waves from the nearby shoreline created a soundtrack meant to soothe. It was a paradise designed to make people drop their guard, a place where secrets could be hidden in plain sight. She hadn't expected anything more than another circuit of observation, perhaps noting potential blind spots in the resort security or logging the faces of unfamiliar guests. But her rhythm faltered as her eyes caught a flash of movement in the far corner of the terrace, an almost imperceptible shift of posture that drew her attention instinctively. Vaughn was there, seated in a low, cushioned chair angled toward the ocean view. His posture was relaxed but alert, the way someone sits when they want to appear casual while remaining ready for anything. It was the person beside him that stole the air from her lungs. A woman with her head tilted just enough to catch the light beneath the wide brim of a straw sun hat. She shifted slightly, turning toward Vaughn, and in that fraction of a second the sunlight illuminated her face. Recognition hit Joselyn like a physical blow. Britt. Not a memory, not a ghost conjured by exhaustion, but alive, undeniably, vividly alive. The impact of that sight slammed into her with a force that almost rooted her to the spot. Her mind scrambled to reconcile the image before her with the narrative she had carried for so long: Britt dead in her mother's arms, her name etched in official records, her absence a wound Jason had been tearing himself apart to heal. Yet here she was, the sun glancing off her skin, her posture calm, her gaze fixed on Vaughn with a familiarity that was intimate and unguarded. There was no mistaking the silent language passing between them. It was not the stilted politeness of strangers or the forced camaraderie of co-conspirators, it was something older, deeper. Their eyes met in quiet conversation, their expressions shifting in ways only two people with a shared past could understand. Vaughn leaned in slightly, his voice low, and Britt's lips curved, not quite a smile, but a subtle acknowledgement that spoke volumes without uttering a single word. It was the kind of unspoken bond forged through trust, secrets, and experiences lived far from the eyes of others. Joselyn's first reaction was disbelief so strong it felt almost hallucinatory. Her body reacted before her mind could catch up, every muscle tensing, her breathing shallow. She ducked behind a tall cluster of tropical plants, her gaze locked on them through the narrow gaps between leaves. Seconds stretched unnaturally long, each one sinking into her like a stone. She scanned their surroundings, no obvious security, no signs of urgency, just the two of them, as though they belonged to a world completely removed from the one she knew. As the shock ebbed, it left in its wake a storm of emotions so tangled she could barely separate them. Betrayal struck first, sharp and immediate. Vaughn had been her partner in the field, someone she trusted with her life more than once. He had been privy to her thoughts, her doubts, her determination to uncover the truth about Britt, and never once had he given any sign that he already knew that truth. Then came anger, hot, unrelenting, pulsing beneath her skin. This wasn't a matter of him withholding some minor detail to protect operational security. This was a seismic fact that could alter everything. The mission she was risking herself for, the sleepless nights Jason had spent chasing shadows, the countless dead ends and false leads, all of it existed under the shadow of this concealed knowledge. Vaughn hadn't just omitted the truth, he had constructed an entire facade to keep it buried. Questions flooded her mind faster than she could process them. How long had he known Britt was alive? Where had they met before today? What was the real nature of their relationship? Was he protecting her, using her, or both? And why, above all, would Britt allow this deception to persist, knowing the pain it had caused Jason, her mother, and everyone else who had mourned her? Was she complicit in Vaughn's silence, or was she another piece in a puzzle too dangerous to solve? The worst realization was the one she couldn't shake: keeping this to herself would make her complicit too. Remaining silent wouldn't just betray Jason. It would betray her own principles, the very core of her training as a WSB agent. Every instinct screamed that this secret was a live wire, too dangerous to hold, impossible to release without consequences. And yet, she knew that revealing it would ignite a chain reaction that could not be stopped. She stayed hidden for another moment, forcing herself to study every detail with the meticulous precision of an operative. The placement of their chairs, the way Britt's hand rested lightly on the table between them, the subtle nod Vaughn gave in response to something she said. Every movement, every glance was committed to memory, a mental dossier she would carry until the moment she acted. When she finally turned away, her decision was already made. The air felt heavier now, charged with the knowledge that she was holding the fuse to something explosive. She would tell Jason. She would break this open, no matter the fallout. Vaughn's silence might have been born of loyalty or fear, but hers would not be. Walking away from that scene, Joselyn knew there was no path back to the way things had been. Whatever trust had existed between her and Vaughn had just been shattered, and the mission they had shared would never again be the same. Somewhere in the distance, the ocean waves kept rolling toward the shore, steady and indifferent, as if mocking the chaos she knew was about to erupt. Joselyn's decision did not come quickly, nor did it come without cost. After leaving the terrace that afternoon, she wandered the winding paths of the Five Poppies resort with the mechanical precision of someone running on muscle memory alone. Every detail of what she had just seen replayed in her mind in merciless clarity. The exact tilt of Britt's head as she looked at Vaughn, the subtle cadence of their body language, the way the air between them seemed thick with a familiarity that could not be faked. She saw it all again and again, each repetition deepening her certainty. There had been no misunderstanding. No chance encounter. This was proof, as undeniable as it was dangerous, that Vaughn had known all along. Her thoughts spiraled. It wasn't just the betrayal that cut deep, it was the magnitude of the lie. Vaughn hadn't withheld some trivial fact, he had concealed a truth so seismic it could shift the entire foundation of their mission. She thought of every moment they had worked side by side, every exchange where she had spoken openly about Jason's desperate search, and Vaughn had offered quiet nods, non-committal answers, and a calm presence that she had mistaken for solidarity. Now she saw it differently. Every one of those moments was laced with deception. Hours passed in a blur of internal war. Her instincts as an operative urged her to weigh the consequences, to consider whether revealing what she had seen might compromise the mission or draw unwanted attention from the very forces she now suspected were operating all around them. Yet her sense of loyalty, to Jason, to the truth, to herself, pushed back with relentless force. She could see Jason's face in her mind. The exhaustion in his eyes, the way his voice had hardened over the weeks of dead ends, and beneath it all, the quiet, stubborn hope he had refused to let go of. She knew what this revelation would mean to him, and she knew that keeping it from him would mean betraying the very reason she had joined this fight in the first place. By the time the sky began to darken, she had made her choice. There was no turning back. She retreated to her room, drawing the curtains tight and activating a secure, encrypted device she kept hidden in a false bottom drawer. The interface flickered to life, and she keyed in a series of authentication codes designed to bypass WSB monitoring systems. This wasn't information she could risk being intercepted, not by the agency, and certainly not by Vaughn. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a long moment, the weight of her choice pressing down on her. Then she began to type. She described the scene with clinical precision, leaving no detail omitted: the placement of Vaughn and Britt's chairs in the secluded corner of the terrace, the way their conversation seemed casual yet carried the intimacy of shared history, the absence of any visible handlers or security, which suggested Vaughn himself might have been her only protector in that moment. She outlined their expressions, their gestures, and most importantly, the fact that Britt was alive. Alive and in close association with a man who had deliberately kept that fact from them all. When she finished, she read the message twice, searching for anything that could be misconstrued or diluted. Then, with a steadying breath, she transmitted it through the secure channel. The moment she hit send, a chill ran through her. It wasn't fear, not entirely, it was the awareness that she had just lit the fuse on something that could not be undone. Jason received the message in a safe house several miles from the resort, and as his eyes scanned the text, a cascade of emotions passed over him. Relief was the first, a raw, unfiltered surge that Britt was alive. But it was quickly tempered by suspicion and calculation. Vaughn's involvement changed everything. It meant Britt's concealment wasn't the work of strangers in the shadows. It was orchestrated by people inside their sphere, people with access, people who could anticipate their every move. He sat back, letting the information settle, then began to mentally chart his next steps. Reaching the resort undetected would be the first challenge. If Vaughn was actively protecting Britt, there would be layers of security, subtle, adaptive, and likely invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for them. If the larger network behind her staged death had infiltrated as deeply as Joselyn's message suggested, then any misstep could trigger a swift and irreversible response. Jason knew the stakes: the moment they tipped their hand, Britt's protectors could vanish with her again, or worse, eliminate her entirely to prevent the truth from surfacing. The danger extended far beyond Britt herself. For Joselyn, this meant moving through a minefield with no margin for error. Her presence at the resort, her connection to Jason, her very role in the mission, any of it could mark her as expendable if she became a liability to whoever was running this operation. Jason understood that each move they made from here on out had to be calculated with precision. They would need cover identities, diversionary tactics, and contingency plans for extraction if things went wrong. Yet the risks did not deter him, they only sharpened his focus. This was the closest he had been to Britt since she had vanished from his world, and he would not squander the opportunity. He began assembling a plan: quiet infiltration, controlled contact, and a careful assessment of whether Britt was in danger or willingly complicit in her own disappearance. But deep down, Jason knew one truth that neither he nor Joselyn could afford to ignore: the moment they set foot on that terrace and Britt saw him, the game would change. The people who had gone to such extremes to fake her death would realize they had lost control of the narrative, and they would stop at nothing to regain it. That meant Jason and Joselyn were not just getting closer to Britt, they were walking directly into the heart of the enemy's stronghold, where one mistake could end them both. And still, there was no hesitation. The truth was finally within reach, and Jason was prepared to pay whatever price it demanded. Deep within, Jason understood that his pursuit of Britt had shifted into something far greater than the repayment of an old debt or the resolution of unresolved emotions. What had begun as a personal mission, fueled by loyalty, guilt, and a stubborn unwillingness to accept her loss, had evolved into a confrontation with a vast and dangerous conspiracy. The deeper he dug, the more he realized that Britt was no longer just a missing person. She was the axis around which a sprawling and meticulously orchestrated operation revolved, a linchpin whose existence, and whose silence, was vital to forces powerful enough to rewrite reality in their favor. This was no longer about bringing someone home. It was about unmasking a network whose reach extended into places most people didn't even know existed, a network that operated with the precision and patience of a master tactician. Every move they had made, From faking Britt's death to embedding Vaughn at the heart of their circle, was deliberate, each step calculated to manipulate outcomes without leaving fingerprints. The resources required to maintain such an illusion spoke of influence that crossed borders, infiltrated organizations, and subverted alliances. Jason could see now that what lay ahead wasn't just a rescue, it was a dismantling of something that had thrived in the shadows for years. He and Joselyn were no longer hunters chasing a single target, they were pawns, knowingly or not, on a board where every square was a trap, every piece an operative with its own hidden agenda. In this deadly chess game, the board stretched far beyond the resort, reaching into intelligence agencies, corporate fronts, and criminal syndicates.